Yo, what is going on, guys? SMH Super Mario Hoops back with some more hoops, and today we're hopping right back into my top 50 list of all time. Now, the player that we got today, as you might see from the title and thumbnail, it is Karl Malone. So where do I got Karl Malone on my all-time list? I got him ranked at number 15. Now, before we hop into this video, gonna need you guys to hit the like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and also feel free to comment down below. What are your thoughts on Karl Malone? If I ranked him too high, too low, properly rated, or if you have a problem with the rest of the list or his comparison to another player on the list, any sort of that jazz.
See what I did there? Jazz.
Without further ado, let's get into Karl Malone. Now, over the course of his career, he was a 14-time NBA All-Star every year from 1988 until 1998, and then from 2000 until 2002. Now, as a lot of people might not know, 1999 there was no All-Star game, so he very well could have made it for 15 consecutive years if that was the case, especially with something we're going to get into later on. He was an 11-time member of the All-NBA First Team every year from 1989 until 1999, and he was a 2-time member of All-NBA Second Team in 1988 and 2000. He also made All-NBA Third Team once in 2001, and he was a 2-time NBA MVP in 1997 and 1999. Now, this is why I brought up that All-Star appearance, because well, in the 1999 season, he was the league MVP, so he almost more than certainly would have been an All-Star that year as well. And in terms of all defensive teams, he made 4 over the course of his career, 3 of which were all defensive first team in 1997 until 1999. And then he made All-NBA second team defensively in 1988. In terms of MVP shares, he received votes on 15 different seasons, all of which were consecutive. And he was even a top 10 finisher for 14 consecutive years. He was a top 5 finisher 9 different times, and he was a 2-time winner of the award, like we said, in 1997 and 1999. When it comes to some all-time stats, 25 points per game is good for 12th all-time. 36,928 points is good for 2nd all-time. 10.1 rebounds per game for 47th all-time. 14,968 rebounds, good for 7th in NBA history. 2,085 steals, good for 11th all-time. A 23.9 PER, good for 17th in NBA history. 234.6 win shares, good for 4th all-time. 142.2 offensive win shares, good for 8th all-time. A 92.4 defensive win share total, good for 6th all-time. A .205 win share per 48 rating, good for 22nd in NBA history. His 5.1 BPM is also 22nd in NBA history, and he has a 99.0 VORP rating, which is good for 4th all-time. So now let's move on to Karl Malone and what he did in the playoffs. Now, statistically speaking, in the playoffs, I would say that Karl Malone decreases. I mean, it's not like it's too drastic, but like I said, everything needs context as well. But while most of his per game averages increase in the postseason, his playing time jump has a large effect on that, and his efficiency drops in the playoffs as well. However, the mailman delivered 20 points per game in 33 of 38 times in his playoff career in terms of playoff series. And these were the first 33 playoff series of his career, every one from 1986 until 2002. He also put up 10 rebounds per game in 26 of 38 playoff series. And in terms of 30 point per game series, he did this 5 different times in his career. Now, believe it or not, Karl Malone has a playoff record of 98 and 95 all time, which is a winning record. And that's pretty impressive considering he doesn't have one championship in his career. To start a majority of his NBA career, Malone and the Jazz were often a middle-of-the-pack team, and they were not really a good playoff scare. I mean, it's much like how we saw the Jazz in this Donovan Mitchell new era up until this past year where they were the 1 seed. From 1986 until 1996, they were never really upset in the playoffs, however, except for 1989 against Golden State. And in this series, Malone wasn't even bad. And honestly, neither was John Stockton. But Golden State just had everyone in a groove. Chris Mullin was unreal, Mitch Richmond, Terry Teagle, Rod Higgins, Manute Bol. Just about everyone was amazing for them, and as a result, the 7-seeded Warriors swept Utah 3-0. Now, I wouldn't really consider this, though, a choke for Malone, as both he and Stockton were great, but their teammates kind of let them down. If I were to give a modern-day NBA series comparison, I'd say it was like the 2015 Rockets Clippers. I mean, the Rockets won because the other guys were unreal this series, and regardless of Chris Paul and Blake Griffin playing so well, guys like Matt Barnes and Jamal Crawford kind of killed them. In this case, those guys for Utah were Daryl Griffith and Thurl Bailey. Now, in terms of all those years I listed, the only other year that you could say someone outplayed Karl Malone in a playoff series was Hakeem Olajuwon. But in 1994, Houston was easily favored to win. Now, in 1995, it was more evenly matched, and sure, Utah was a higher seed, but Houston had just added Clyde Drexler mid-season, and this series went all the way, and Houston eventually won. And this series was a close matchup between the two. I mean, I think Hakeem was a little bit better than Karl Malone, but still it was really close between both of them. Hakeem's cast also somewhat outperformed Karl's this series as well. But in 1997, the Jazz got revenge. And even though statistically for the series, including the fourth quarters, you might assume Hakeem was better than Karl Malone, but actually Malone did most of his damage later in the fourth quarter in crunch time situations, especially this series when it mattered most. Now in Game 6, that was all Stockton. And Hakeem and Clyde for Houston both kind of choked for them as well. But the Jazz went on to face Chicago in the NBA Finals. And in the finals, while Karl Malone was the league MVP this season, this series kind of proved why he probably wasn't the right choice for the MVP. I mean, Malone was okay, but he wasn't great, and Jordan took every bit of that MVP personal. But in 1998, the Jazz were out for revenge. In this season, Jordan won the MVP, but Karl had his eyes set on one thing, and that was the one from the finals. In the first round, they drew Houston again, and after all those times Malone was kind of compatible or was somewhat outplayed by Hakeem, in this series, I mean, he completely demoralized the Dream. The mailman averaged over 26 points per game, 12.5 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 1.5 steals, 1.5 blocks, 46% from the field, 83% from the free throw line, and more points or rebounds in the winner go home Game 5 than Olajuwon, Drexler, and Barkley had combined that night. In the second round, Karl Malone faced the second coming Twin Towers of Tim Duncan and David Robinson. Now, in years prior, Malone would have a partner in crime for this, and that was Mark Eaton. But he wasn't on the team anymore, and since Greg Oystertag was his replacement for this era, it kind of required a lot more out of Malone, but he did it. I mean, David Robinson was awful this series, and Duncan wasn't bad, especially as a rookie this year, but Karl Malone was a little bit better and led them to the conference finals. And in these conference finals, it was arguably Malone's most impressive feat yet, facing a team of 4 All-Stars, as he was the only one on his own team to make it that year since Stockton did not. But even though the Lakers had Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant, Eddie Jones, and Nick Van Exel, it wasn't enough for the mailman. And not only was it not enough for winning, but even competing. I mean, Utah swept them, winning each game by an average of 13.5 points per game, and Karl outplayed a 25-year-old Shaq, while Kobe and Van Exel were pretty awful this series as well, bringing them back to the finals to play Chicago once again. In Game 1 this time around, the Jazz, who had home court advantage, actually took the game in OT. But then MJ went off in Game 2 to split the series, and then in Game 3 it was just a murder. I mean, the Bulls won by 42 points to go up 2-1, and they stole home court advantage. And in Game 4, despite the Jazz winning with under 5 minutes left to go, Jordan had 9 points in the last 5 minutes, and the Bulls won to go up 3-1 in the series. And with his legacy on the line more than ever before, Karl Malone did deliver. 39 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists, 63% from the field, 66% true shooting, 21.2 BPM, and a plus 38 net rating in Game 5 as he straight up carried Utah to a win. He outplayed Jordan that night, and the next highest scorer for his starting lineup player on Utah had 9 points. And in Game 6, Karl Malone dropped 31 points, 11 rebounds, 7 assists, 58% from the field, 65% true shooting. But unfortunately for Malone, and as Scottie Pippen once said, the mailman does not deliver on Sundays. June 14th, 1998 was indeed a Sunday. And while he put up those great numbers, his last moment of the series was a critical turnover off a Michael Jordan steal and eventual dagger on the other side. What could have been a legendary moment to force Game 7 in Utah and possibly come back down 3-1 on Michael Jordan and the Bulls turned into a quick collapse and ultimately another missed opportunity. And even though Malone won MVP the next year in 1999, he never sniffed another title with Utah. Now in 2004 with the Lakers, he did make the finals, but that was a complete disaster in itself. So when it comes to Karl Malone, the basketball player, I'd say he's underrated. I get that a lot of people dislike him for certain reasons, and rightfully so. As we know, he has some uncharacteristically peculiar moments both on and off the court. I know a lot of people want to use this to bring down his NBA career, but at the end of the day, I'm measuring these guys for what they did as an NBA player. And when it comes to the mailman, I think that he's one of the greatest to ever do it, and he's the greatest player to never win a championship. I mean, 9 years in the top 5 for MVP is especially crazy when the 1990s era is known for 2 things: Michael Jordan and dominant centers. Karl Malone, even though he was a big man, technically wasn't either of those things. And to constantly be among the league's best is extremely impressive. One of the best rollers in the pick and roll game of all time, as well as the 12 to 15 foot shot in the pick and pop. But I think when it comes down to what he did in the NBA, it's extremely hard to discount stuff like his 1998 finals run, or multiple MVPs, and all the all-time stats where he ranks like top 10 in. And as a result, I think Karl Malone is the top 15 NBA player of all time. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think about Karl Malone. Did I go too high on him, or did I not go high enough on him? And I think that's going to do it for me. So I'm out. Peace.